Hey, Christopher, the podcast Life as a. And speaking of podcasts, who hasn't listened to one in the last week? I mean, that whole world is blowing up right now. It seems like everyone and their brother is starting their own podcast. But what I want to know is, can you actually make a professional living off of it? Is it a realistic option for you? Well, the only way to find out is to speak to someone who's doing it. And that's what this show is all about, Life as a, and that's what this channel is all about. And what I did, I found this great guest. His name is Gary Arndt, and he's the host of this wildly popular podcast, Everything Everywhere Daily. It garners over 1.6 million monthly downloads. Yeah, this is no joke. He's just the guy to ask. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm going to present to you some of the clips from the main audio recording. And we're going to get into this world of professional podcasting to let you find out whether or not it is a realistic option. Before we jump into it though, I would love that like or subscribe. Best way to let this algorithm know that this content does matter. All right, well, I think it's about time to get going. So why don't we? What I'm after here, what I'm driving at in this question is, what do you think it is that goes into the success that you're having as opposed to others who maybe aren't achieving that?
I made the decision early on to not do an interview show because there's a lot of interview podcasts. That is both easier and harder. The biggest problem with doing an interview show is, of course, scheduling, because we had this scheduled yesterday and I ended up missing it. And I've done interview shows before, and that's always a constant thing. Finding guests can be a problem, but by the same token, you just have a conversation. It's which part is more difficult, and then the editing part is usually more difficult when you're doing an interview because you have two different people talking. There's ums and ahs and breaks and things like that.
Got it.
Maybe swear words you got to take out. Doing a monologue show like I do is trivial to record. Like, I just sit down, I start talking until I flub up. I just move it back to that point and start again. And by the time I'm done, I'm done. So it takes me about 20 minutes to record a 10-minute show. The challenging part is the upfront part, and that's the research. And so what I just basically made a show that was the show I wanted to listen to. I've had other ideas for podcasts, but they all stem from that point. What would I be interested in? Because if I'm interested in it, then I think someone else might be interested in it too. And you also have to have a good format. A lot of people start a podcast and it's just, well, I like talking about this stuff. And that usually is not a good enough basis for something. You need to have a format that's a little something more. And I think with mine, it's evergreen content that is good forever. I have people listening to my very first episode still, 4.5 years ago, and it was about the Byzantine Empire. I don't think that's going to be changing anytime soon. That'll be good in 10 years. So I think making evergreen content, doing a monologue scripted show is something that very few shows do, certainly on a daily basis. Sets the show apart and allows me to do something that few other people do.
What makes your show interesting is the daily nature of it. I mean, I don't have any stats off the top of my head here that would indicate that is out of the norm, but certainly, I mean, most podcasts, as we know,
it is out of the norm.
It is out of the norm.
Your average podcast is going to be a weekly podcast,
right?
With some more producing less frequently than that. There are very few daily shows. And it's not easy. When I started this, everybody said I was crazy. It's like, this is a great idea, but you're eventually going to get burned out because people that have tried doing daily podcasts always give up eventually.
Yeah.
And most people who do a daily podcast, they do something like 5 minutes and they record all of them at once or an entire week's worth at once. And that's not what I'm doing at all. I'm writing a 2,000-word term paper every day.
Yeah.
And
I mean, in listening to your podcast, the level of detail and insight that you're providing there, this isn't something that you're going to just sort of like, get done in 5-10 minutes. This is something that's all consuming.
No, it takes hours.
Yeah.
But, but at the same token, people go to work 8 hours a day all over the world or more. So it's not like putting in that much time is that crazy. It's a job. And my job is putting together a show every day, and it takes about that much time. I would say on average 4 to 6 hours to put together, to write up a show. There's a lot of kind of preliminary research before that where I get comfortable with the topic. I'll think about it quite a bit. But yeah, that's a work day. And
Yeah.
so it's not really any different.
Yeah, and I suppose too, I mean, once you have your rhythm and routine and you structure it down into these bite-sized parts of your day and tasks, I suppose, leading up to, ultimately publishing an episode, that's kind of the flow. So really quickly, I mean, this segment, Day in the Life, what would it be like? What would it look like? You just sort of alluded to it there, I suppose. Some
I normally
initial
wake up at
research.
10 or 11 in the morning,
Yeah.
and you'll see why. Um, I do the things that I have to do to communicate with other people during the day, during the workday. I always, if I have an interview like this or something, I always schedule it for the afternoon
Hmm.
because I'm waking up late. And then I will usually in the evening set about to start writing the show. So I have not begun on tomorrow's show yet. And we're recording this at a little after in 3 in the afternoon, my time. And then I'll usually end up finishing the show. Maybe I'll watch a movie while I'm writing it. I'll finish it at somewhere between 2 to 4 in the morning. I record it. I go to bed, start again the next day.
Rinse and repeat. There you go.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. And how long has the show been going for? I mean, how long has that routine been in place for now?
4.5 years.
One final question here. Any advice, words of wisdom that you'd be giving to somebody who is interested in this?
If you're going to do it, take it seriously. The vast majority of podcasts never make it to episode 3.
That's
People
right.
like, oh, yeah, I'll start a podcast. And it's just kind of a lark and they do it and then it never goes anywhere. That's the vast majority of podcasts. They're non-existent. You hear these numbers like there's millions of podcasts. Well, it's millions of that, like
Yeah.
non-serious attempts. So if you want to take this real serious, you're going to have to make it a priority because a lot of people, they start it and then they got other things in their lives and then something comes up and then what gets cut, the podcast, and then they don't go back to it and then it dies. So you're going to have to make it a priority and you're going to have to give it at least like 18 to 24 months. And most people don't do that. They give up after a while. It's like, well, this isn't going anywhere. It's just worth my time. And I've had periods like that and I just plowed through.
Hmm.
You hit a plateau and then you eventually start to see things take off again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And unless you have that, then I don't think you're going to find success.
There it is.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that video, and if you did, I definitely encourage you to check out the full-length audio version. There we dive into so much more in the way of rewards, challenges, tips, insights, and Gary shares this really great story you're not going to want to miss. Anyway, you can access this wherever you find your podcast. Just do that search for Life as a ... Oh, and one more thing too, again, I would love that like or subscribe. Heck, drop in a comment here. I'd love to know what you think of this show and any suggestions you have for it moving forward. Anyway, I will have another video coming right next week, so don't miss it. All right, until then, we'll see ya.